What is up, bestseller? Welcome in to the Bestseller Playbook, where we talk about writing and selling books that last. I'm your host and best-selling author, Bob Wheatley, and today we're talking about word count. How long should your book be? Now, there's no tried and true answer to this. This is truly an art form. This isn't a math problem, but general best practices when it comes to how long should your book be. First thing that we need to ask is what type of book is it? Is it a fiction book? Is it nonfiction? So let's start in the world of fiction. This is truly, you can do whatever you want. You might write a poem that's one page. You might write a novel that's 1600. You could write an Anna Karenina that's, 2 inches thick. That's totally fine. In the world of nonfiction, which is where my books are, where most of our clients live, there are general rules of thumb that we'll talk through today. We always encourage our clients in the world of speaking, asking a similar question: how long should my speech be? One thing that we always say: there's no such thing as a speech that is too long, only a speech that is too boring. It's going to be the same thing with a book. There's no such thing as a book that is too long, only a book that is too boring. So it truly depends on the project. It depends on the subject matter. It also depends on the reader. That's going to be a part of your pre-book planning as you're sitting down saying, who am I writing this book for? You need to understand, is this an academic who could handle a 3, 4, 500-page deep dive into a subject? Or is this somebody who's in their teens or in college, short attention spans, 140 characters at a time? We need to make that decision. We need to understand, who are we writing the book for? So knowing that there's no such thing as a book that's too long, only a book that is too boring. In general, when I was writing my first book, and if you're watching this on video, I got a copy of it here. It's called Our Heart's Desire. This book is 19 chapters long, and it's 191 pages. So it's definitely a book. It's not an article, it's not a booklet, stuff like that. But as I was looking at my own books on the shelves, like books by other people, but books that I own, I truly wanted my book to have a certain feel as far as the weight of it. And that might sound strange, but I'm sure you've had the experience where as you're reading a book, it's just really thin. And yes, it's a book, but there's just a sense when you pick up a book that is, say, yay thick, like, all right, this is a book in my hands. This is not something, it's not as if the author ran out of things to say. So in this book, it's 19 chapters long, it's 191 pages. So when I took a look at the books on my shelves that were around that range, 180, 190, something like that, they just felt a little thin to me. And so what I ended up doing, let me flip to the back of the book here. So I actually added a reader's guide. Okay, so you can see that. Got my reader's guide. And so with each individual chapter, there's 19 chapters, I added different, I have key moments with some bullet points. I have key quotes from the chapter, and then key takeaways. What do I want the reader to specifically take away from that chapter? And on all of these individual chapters in the reader's guide, it's like a front and a back. So it's basically a page and a half, maybe 2 pages. But what that did strategically, that added 19 pages to the book. That's not 19 pages that, I would never say that my book is, what's that math? 210 pages. It's not. The book is 191, but with the desired thickness. And that might sound strange, but when somebody looks at my book and compares it to some other book on the shelf, all in with the endorsements in the front, the table of contents with you got the acknowledgments in the back. I have an index of the stories that I cited because this book is about movies and books and Broadway shows and stuff like that. And then also the end notes. All in, I think this book is 240 pages front and back. So 120 pieces of paper, right? So when you ask the question, how long should my book be? You might even want to be aware or thinking about the the weight or the feel of the book itself. Another thing to consider, this book is 5.5 by 8.5, as far like 5.5 inches on the bottom, 8.5 inches on the spine. Now, that's a very common size, but you also see books that are 6 inches by 9 inches. So if we added a half inch on the bottom and a half inch on the side on every single page, 240 pages front and back, then I would fit the same amount of words onto fewer pages, right? All of a sudden, it's not 120 pieces of paper, it's 108 pieces of paper. So these are just things to consider. If it matters to you what your book looks like and what it feels like in somebody's hands, great. You should take that stuff into consideration because, again, you as an author, yes, you're a thought leader. Yes, you're an artist, but you're also a business owner. You're, metaphorically speaking, you're a shop owner. If you're running a bakery and people are walking into your bakery, you'd want them to have a great experience. You'd want the floors to be swept. You want the windows to be clean. I think about a book much in the same way. You probably had the experience where you're reading a book and it just doesn't feel good on your fingers. Have you ever had those uh, covers or book jackets that just feel, it almost feels like a chalkboard or something like that? For me personally, the words on the inside might be amazing, but I'm having a bad experience as a reader because the author made a poor decision on the dust jacket, right? So getting back to the original question on how long should your book be? If it starts getting boring, it's too long. So that's kind of that's the litmus test. I will say this, that is another reason why having editors is so important for your book because with each and every round of edits, you start with the developmental edit, you're going to be cutting out big chunks. Then you go into the copy edit, you're going to be tweaking, cutting out smaller chunks, and then the proofread. In my experience, it's been very rare that I add words to the manuscript. It's usually that I'm taking words out, right? So let's say you have a book that's 65,000 words, right? 65,000 words would be about at 300 words a page. That's maybe 250-ish pages, which is like erring on the longer end of a self-help book, but that'd be very reasonable as far as picking that up. It's probably a $20 book, right? So if your manuscript, if your rough draft manuscript is 65,000 words, my goal would be how do I say the same exact thing in fewer words? How do I trim the fat? Is there anything that's redundant? Because if it is not a positive, if it's a neutral sentence or even a negative, like if it takes away from the reader's experience, it's got to go, right? I don't want it to feel like the cupboards are bare, but I do want the words in the book to be as lean as possible to where every single sentence is so important. It's just hitting the nail on the head. If it is not, which as you read your book more and more, when you go from draft one to draft two to draft three, you need to have the discipline and the courage truly to look at a sentence and be like, I don't know if this serves the reader. Or, I kind of said that the paragraph before. Cut it out. That is totally fine. So as we bring things home on this question, unlike other questions on this channel, there is not a specific answer. Your book should be 58,000 words. Not so. The general rule of thumb, your book can be any length as long as it keeps the reader's attention. So I guess I'll add this sort of as a PS, right? Here's my postscript for today. Another thing that I did on my first book, Our Heart's Desire, 191 pages. There's 19 chapters. So each chapter on average is about 10 pages. And I did that on purpose because knowing the person that's going to read my book, they're probably going to be in their 20s, maybe 30s. I'm a millennial. They're probably going to be a millennial. That's not to say that all millennials have short attention spans, but a lot of us do. That's what we've been, how we've been trained to live, right? We're always moving on to the next thing because of this world of social media and stuff like that. So when my rough draft had a chapter with 17 pages, and then an editor or a friend reads it and says, yeah, you kind of lost me on this chapter, that was valuable information for me to know. That was my editor or my friend saying, I am bored. You're losing me. So, in the final draft of this book, the one that is out in the marketplace today, that 17-page chapter became an 11-page chapter or an 8-page chapter, right? So, when somebody is reading your book, even the length of a chapter is a conscious decision, right? When I start getting in double digits, as far as the page count per chapter, I'm starting to get wary. I have never published a chapter with 20 pages. There are some books that I've read that chapters will have 50 pages at a time, right? I've read books that are 200, 250 pages, and they're just these monster chapters, right? It'd be like, section 1, 2, 3, 4, and there's no breaks in between. For me personally, knowing that I can't just sit down and read for 4 straight hours, I'm probably consuming a book in 10, 20, maybe 30-minute increments. And as human beings, we like to solve puzzles. We like to finish things. So by giving your reader a win every 10 pages, chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, by giving them those quick wins, I have found that actually helps the reader to get through it faster. Because I don't know if this is your experience, but for me, when I sit down to read a book, knowing that I'm short on time or maybe I'm tired, right? It's been a long day, been a long week. I will look to see how long is this chapter? Like what am I signing myself up for? If the chapter's 8 pages, I'll say, yeah, I got that. No problem. If the chapter's 32 pages and it's 9:30 at night, I'm like, oh man, I don't know if I could finish 32 pages. I definitely can't finish 32 pages before I want to go to bed. So, am I willing to read another 8 pages and know that this chapter is not going to be done when I go to bed? Am I willing to set myself up for a cliffhanger that's going to keep me up at night? So, when you ask yourself the question, how long should my book be? The other question to ask is, how long should each chapter be? So, hope this was helpful. Again, the key takeaway from today, there's no such thing as a book that is too long. There's only a book that is too boring. If you have any questions on all things books, on writing, publishing, sales, and marketing when it comes to book launches, leave me a comment, ask your specific question. I'll be happy to answer that in future videos. And as we wrap things up today, just remember, the shortest way to a best-selling book is having a best-selling plan. We'll see you next time.